Good morning, Haitham. In Dubai. I'm also in Dubai. How are you today?
Good morning. Very good. Thank you.
Well,
Hot,
thank
hot and
you.
humid today in Dubai.
Hot and humid. I was out in Al Qudra early this morning cycling, seeing beautiful desert oryx, enjoying the
Oh, wow.
unique and pristine biodiversity of Dubai.
Fantastic. Speaking of biodiversity, there you go.
Indeed. So you, Haitham, are your advisor to the UNWTO Secretary General on Sustainable Tourism. You're one of the Middle East's foremost experts on sustainable destination development, advisor to the Ministry of Tourism in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What we hear from scientists on biodiversity is that species are disappearing at a faster pace than any point in human history. And as part of this great reset after COVID-19, there's opportunity for us to reset the balance between nature and people, business, biodiversity, and of course, the tourism economy is central to this. Where you advise governments and destinations, what is your advice on translating the science into policy and into practical actions?
Thank you again for this opportunity. As you know, I'm a big advocate of sustainable tourism and biodiversity. And some of the hotbeds of biodiversity in the world, such as Brazil and Costa Rica and Panama and Guatemala, where there's been such a great balance on tourism and biodiversity. Whilst there's a lot of risk today to the various population of species across the globe, it is really critical for governments to apply not just as policy, but as practice, right? Apply conservations for all species, not necessarily take certain species and consider them endangered or at the risk of being endangered. I think we are today in a position where we have to start thinking that every species is actually susceptible to becoming endangered one way or another, right? Forest fires, urban development is all taking away, and deforestation is taking away habitats of various species around the world. Yet we still see pockets of conservations around the region as well as around the world. It's because where governments have applied policies that were practical and have been put in practice to corner off large areas of their landscape to conserve those and make sure that these species are protected. However, I think the missing element and component there is the education to the tourist. That education about sustainable tourism and about biodiversity, which comes hand in hand, I think is something where governments need to add in their policy, and tourism boards should include in their educational programs.
The World Economic Forum just published a report 2 weeks ago showing the value of ecotourism as part of a great reset. And ecotourism driving both biodiversity conservation, because without the revenue from tourism, many national parks, botanical gardens, nature reserves will simply not have the money to continue conserving the environment. And they forecast that 290 billion in revenue can be created in 2030 if governments don't deprioritize ecotourism and conservation in this next phase we're entering. Where you sit in the Middle East, there's many emerging destinations and product that's really in pristine biodiversity settings. And there's opportunity not to repeat the mistakes that were made in maybe some of the more established destinations elsewhere in the world. What green shoots are you seeing in the region?
I think, look, a well-managed tourist sector can contribute significantly to reducing threats, the threats we are discussing today. Threats to key wildlife populations, threats to key green habitats, and threats to the environment around these populations. But also it can contribute significantly through tourism revenues if it is really well managed. We're seeing green shoots, as you mentioned today, in Al Ola in Saudi Arabia. We're seeing green shoots in Al Asir region in Saudi Arabia. One of the highest peaks in the region is Al Suda, where you still have significant species of different populations of wildlife, including baboons who are living in their own natural habitats. You still, I think, where I worked previously as CEO of Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority, I think that emirate still has a great deal of potential. And where you know it's a 45-minute drive from Dubai, and suddenly you're into driving through wildlife in the desert, where you see oryx and deer and foxes and camels, and donkeys. You go to the mountains, you find wild goats. They're all still living in their own natural habitats, uninterrupted by human intervention or development. Al Asir region, where in Saudi, Al Suda and Al Baha are beautiful terrains, great nature, very green, with an abundance of wildlife that is today has been only protected by the fact that it has not been open for tourism, if you like, right? So it's really critical that the policy around preservation and conservation of these regions and managing the education of tourists. And if you remember in the past, the trending term of over-tourism, right, that was across many cities in the world. And we saw the over-tourism's impact on countries like Iceland, right? And we go back and say, look, if a tourism ministry or board manages that destination through educating tourists, through ensuring that they have the right conservation and protection of their wildlife and their environment, and also managing the flow of tourists, that is an absolute mandatory policy across the world. And these green shoots, where you see, we mentioned in Al Ola and across the Red Sea, if you like, in Saudi, there is so much potential of beautiful areas where they have been protected for so many years, right? And now Saudi is opening these up for the world to experience. But sustainable tourism is very high on Saudi's agenda. And I can also think of the UAE's conservations, whether it's in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, in their beautiful desert and the beautiful wildlife around that. So I think it's the importance of that tourism economies, right, and to the attractive landscapes and rich biodiversity that this region actually has, is something that we must really continue to develop and continue to protect.
Okay, so you bring an important perspective. It's not only looking at governments to do their bit, not only industry and local communities, but also with travel and with tourism and that behavioral change.
Absolutely. And you know, one that comes to mind is the island of Palau, which I'm sure you've heard of. And I don't know if you've heard of the Pledge of Palau. And this is absolutely one of the most creative ideas to protect the environment and to protect their biodiversity through educating tourists. So when you go to apply for a visa to go to Palau, you have to sign a pledge that you will not harm the environment, you will not feed the wildlife, you will not litter. And because the island of Palau is a small island with a population of, I think, 50,000 people, yet they have about 500,000 tourists. So they already knew that they are outnumbered and it's impossible for them to be able to police the tourists. And therefore, they made the tourists own the responsibility of protecting the environment and their wildlife and their marine life through a pledge that you'd have to sign before entering the country.
Excellent. So we're co-creating that future together, and everyone in the value chain down to the traveler involved in this effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And exactly, I can't reiterate more on the importance for tourists to own the responsibility as much as government.
So I'm going to conclude, but maybe I can ask you a final question, and that's to reveal a little secret that you think you would want to share today on what would you say, if you look at the region, what's the most innovative business model behind bringing together the different stakeholders, taking a long-term view, but you think some of the listeners might not be aware of it, you want to share with us today?
Look, I think I go back to Saudi because Saudi has been the last frontier. And I imagine Saudi as a region that's so diverse in its landscape, in its nature, in its population, in its cultures, and in heritage and history. Probably one of the most diverse countries around the world. The fact that it's been protected for so many years, and now Saudis are making Saudi available to the world. Yet you see the protection of Al Ola, for example. Al Ola is one of the most beautiful outdoor museums in the world. It also has beautiful farms, especially date farms, a very, very beautiful culture and history that dates back, 7,000 years at least. So the way that Al Ola is opening up to the world, so carefully staged and so carefully balanced, to ensure that it is not necessarily becoming overcrowded or becoming open to mass tourism. Also with their development plan of accommodation, it is all homogeneous, if you like, with the scenery homogeneous to the locations, ensuring that it doesn't become an eyesore in any of the museum, if you like, around it. So I think the way that Al Ola has planned its development and has planned its communications around that region has been really exemplary. And I think there's so much more that can be done for Al Ola going forward and ensuring that protection plan continues to be intact.
So I had the privilege of visiting Al Ola in February, just before the great lockdown. And yes, blown away by pristine environment. I left deeply under the impression that there's a master plan here, doing it right from the outset. And also seeing young people. The barriers to entry in the travel and tourism industry makes it easy to transform a local community by creating jobs. I could see the entrepreneurs, proud young tour guides, really left with so many good memories.
Very passionate about delivering their message, about the history, about the calligraphy and the inscriptions on the mountains. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time this morning, and we look forward to seeing you at WTM in London, whether it's virtually or in person. Thank you, Haitham.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.